Hi, and welcome to another training video from the IT service. In this video, I want to take a look at comparing items within a column by using a pivot table. The data you see here on the screen is information, it's real information from the Chicago Police Department. It's information about crime over a 4-year period or so from 2012 through to 2016. There's all sorts of really interesting information here, perhaps the most interesting of all being that in that 4-year period from 23rd of July 2012 through to September 2016, there were 635,000 crimes of which we have information here. So a huge amount of data there, a huge amount of crime there. And pivot tables are really your only tool for analysis when you're dealing with this amount of data. Even if I was to ask a simple question like how many crimes are there per month, without using a pivot table, you'd really struggle. You can use things like subtotals tools and so on, but pivot tables really kind of blow that out the water for power of analysis and speed of analysis. What I want to look at though is a couple of columns. The first one being the primary type, which is the kind of class of crime, the type of crime. You can see we've got examples of motor vehicle theft, assault, narcotics and so on. And I want to know what the arrest rate was for each of those types of crime. If I look across here, we have a column I, that shows the arrest value, whether it's true or false. Now, as I say, there's all sorts of other information here. We can do a lot of work on this file, but that's what I'm interested in at this particular time. So I want to know what the arrest rates were using column I for the different types of crime in column F. I'm using Excel 2016, so to insert a pivot table, it's on the Insert tab on the ribbon, and then I select Pivot Table. The dialog box here has asked where my data is. It's already picked it up and where I want to put the pivot table, so I'm just going to click OK on there and give it a few seconds just to build the pivot table from this large data set. Now I want to see a row for each type of crime, so I'm going to put primary type in the panel here on the right, down into the row area, and there we go, we have a row for each type of crime. And I want to do analysis, remember, on the arrest rate, so that's the arrest column. Where do I put this arrest column to find the rate? Well, normally if you want to do calculations on something, you put it in the values area. So let's try that. I'll put arrest in the values area. That seems to be good. We can see here there were 939 arrests for arson, 39,000 for assault, 114,000 for battery, and so on. But that's not actually accurate. Remember what count does. It simply counts values within a field. And if we go back to our raw data here, we can see that the arrest column, I'll just scan over a bit, there we are. This arrest column doesn't simply contain, for example, a date if there was an arrest and not if there wasn't. It contains the word true or false. In other words, there's a value there for every crime, whether the arrest happened or not. So in our pivot table, what we're being told here is under the category of arson, there are 939 rows with a value in that arrest column. Whether that's true or false, we can't tell. So I can't really put that there. If I want to split out the arrest into true or false, rather than putting it in the values area, I'm going to take it from here in the values area and move it to the columns area. Now I'll be able to see I've got a column for where it's true and a column for where it's false. What then do I count, or what do I put into my values area? Well, it doesn't really matter. Something I want to count that will be in every row. There's something for every crime. So every crime should have an ID. I'm going to put the ID field, therefore, into the values area and just count those up. Now, we've got a strange figure here. It's tried to add them. And this is something you'll find with anything that's numeric. The default behavior is it adds them up. So ID 1 for crime 1, then ID 2 for crime 2 will count as being 3 because 1 plus 2 is 3. I want to not add those ID numbers up, so I'm going to choose value field settings and change that to a count, and that way we'll simply be counting how many crimes come under the false heading and how many come under the true heading. So there we go. We can see there for arson there were 848 without an arrest and 91 with an arrest, giving us our total that we saw earlier of 939 crimes. Now for that I could calculate a percentage. Somewhere over here I could write a formula that will then do a calculation of one over the other as my percentage. But I want to put this within the pivot table so I can use that as a field and do other things with it perhaps a little bit later. If you want to do the kind of analysis that compares values across field options, then we need to do that by adding in effectively a new field. And on the Analyze tab on the Pivot Table Tools tab, I've got here fields, items and sets. Now, when you click on this, you need to be a little bit careful about where you are in the background. You can see I've got calculated field there. There's also this thing, calculated item, but that's not enabled. If I don't click within my data here, but click on my heading, and now go back to field, item and sets, both calculated field and calculated item are available. So you've got to be slightly careful about where you've clicked within your pivot table, because that will affect what's available to you, what you can see when you choose options up here on the ribbon. Now, what's the difference between a calculated field and a calculated item? If I want to create a calculation, for example, between two dates, let's say I had a date of the crime and a date of the arrest, and I wanted to know the difference between those two, so how long the average time was between crime and arrest, I'd be calculating between the two fields, date of crime, date of arrest. That would be a calculated field. What I want to do though is calculate items within a field. So I want to do a calculation based on the difference between true and false, the number of trues and number of falses, which are both within one field. They're both within that arrest column, as we can see here. So if you want to calculate items within a single field, that's when you'll want calculated item. And that's what we want now. So I choose calculated item, and I must give my new field a value, or a name rather. So I'm going to call this arrest rate. And the formula refers to the different fields. So it's how many trues there are out of the grand total. So I can refer to my field values by using them from the panel down here on the bottom right corner, the items column. So remember, for the arrest rate, I want to know how many were arrested. So that's the number where it was true. I'll add that in. Out of the grand total. And the grand total isn't an item here, so I just need to add them up to give me the grand total. So true divided by true plus false. Close brackets. And that will give me the number of trues out of the grand total, which is the percentage of people who were arrested, or crimes which resulted in an arrest. I click OK. Takes a moment just to do the calculations involved. And hey presto, there's my arrest rate. I don't, now I've used the true and false values in my calculation, need to retain them here. So I can click on the column labels filter button and say, yeah, I no longer need to see true and false. I just need to see the arrest rate. The laptop's just taking a second to catch up with me there. So I no longer need to see false or true, just need the arrest rate. Click OK. So I need them to create the calculation, but then I can choose to not display them, filter them out in the same way I could anything else. So there's my arrest rate. Obviously the arrest rate is the same as the grand total, so I'm also going to turn that off. I can turn off the grand total by going to the Design tab on the ribbon, and here we go, we've got a button near the start of the ribbon for grand totals, and I just want to turn them off for rows and columns. And that gives me my arrest rate in a column of its own. Finally, I'd like it to show as a proper percentage rather than 0.0969 whatever. The easiest way to do that, I'm going to simply highlight the data in that column, and then there's a shortcut on the keyboard. I'm pressing Control Shift 5. Shift 5 is the percent button. Control and percent formats the cell as a percentage. But obviously I could also have gone on the Home tab and chosen the percent button here, just as I can now increase the number of decimals I'm seeing to get a little bit more accuracy. So there we go. I can see that arson results in a 9.69% arrest rate, whereas, for example, concealed carry license violation is a whopping 75% arrest rate, and interference with a public officer, don't do that, almost certain to get caught, nearly a 95% arrest rate. So there we go. In this video we've looked at how to add a calculated column which calculates between items within another column. I hope you find that useful, and check back soon for more videos from the IT service.